Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and for today's video we are going to go over, just for one last time, the rankings of every single school in PvP and how all the matchups shake out. And this is for the... well, I'm recording this on the night of the 11th, so I don't know if the update has come out yet, but I did want to make this video just to sort of benchmark where we are in terms of what the meta is looking like just at the moment, and so we can sort of compare that to where the meta is heading. I don't know yet if I'm going to make a, I guess, prediction, quote-unquote, as to, you know, what the matchups are going to look like going forward in the next meta, but for right now, I just want to go over one last time, just based off of this tier list, where I think all of the matchups currently stand and have stood at the end of Balance's reign of terror. That's the whole reason why I'm making this, because there's a lot of these that are sure to shake up, and we're really just gonna have to see how that ends up going. So for the time being, let's go over, I'm just going to go ahead and categorize all of the safe matchups, because as you see, this video, the last one that I made on the 3rd of October, was 47 minutes long. I don't want to spend that long talking about these, so especially as it's more of a recap than sort of an assessment as to where we are, and these will be hopefully inaccurate within the week. I would really hope so. I hope they don't push back the Selenopolis update by too much, but that's what we're going to do. That's what we're after. So, balance versus death. Yeah, that's going to go in safe. Yeah, that for sure. What else is there? Storm. Yeah, that's going to go in safe. That's going to go in safe. That's going to go in safe. Of course, that is going to go in safe as well, so is this. So without a doubt, there's still definitely a lot of safe matchups, and I'll reorder these after. But yeah, definitely still a lot of safe matchups. We're just going to have to sort of see how it goes. I do want to briefly touch on this. I think I had life favored in this video by maybe like 10 to 15 games, more games rather, out of 100 compared to death, so it was in the likely category. But, you know, recent experiences, so to say, have definitely made me move this over a tier. I don't think it's the safest matchup out of all of these, but yeah, you'll see me go over that when I just sort of order everything. So other than that, these are all the safe matchups. We've actually seen a slight reduction in a couple, so we are, you know, down one safe matchup. One has narrowed up, which I am kind of glad about, if I'm honest, but, you know. Let's go ahead and, yeah, let's just see, where would I put all of these? Maybe this here, maybe this here, and then death is really getting the short end of the stick. I'm realizing that as I'm looking at all of this. There are 4 matchups with death on the bottom in the safe category. Yeah, death is not really having very like too fun of a time, just to say the least. So yeah, I think honestly I'll move that one down a bit. This one was towards the back, but you'll see next week as to why there's been some reduction here, but it's definitely not falling out of the safe category. And then, yeah, I think all in all, this is probably a good place to leave that. So these are all of the safe matchups. So that's what's going on. Obviously, one-sided is still one-sided. It's going to be very fun to revisit this in a little bit once the update drops, and Balance can't just mercilessly mark ice anymore. That's going to be fun as hell to make that video when that happens. So let's go over just all of the tilt leans and likelies. So we've got fire versus balance. I put this in the likely category, favoring the balance last time, and I think that holds up. I think that Balance versus Fire. There's been a little reduction. This is the furthest to the right in terms of the likely matchups, but I do think that Balance versus Fire, I think that the Balance is favored in maybe 15 more games out of 100 compared to the Fire. So if you were to play, like, I don't know, 200 games, for example, the Balance would win 115 of them to the Fire's 85, that sort of thing. So that's how that works. So there's been a little reduction. Fire definitely can get the better of a Balance if the Balance is sort of deck failing. You know, you've got to play for different things against Fire compared to every other school, so that's where that's going to get put. Balance versus Life. This was in the safe category last time, but it is definitely not there anymore, and as a matter of fact, it's going to end up here. And the reason being is Balance just fundamentally does not do too great against Giga Heals, and since we've been seeing more of those as of late, I think I'm going to go ahead and put Balance in Balance versus Life just in the tilt balance column. This has been a large reduction, but I genuinely think this matchup is about as close to toss-up as you can get. This one is all about deck RNG, as are all of the tilts, just to give it a buck. It's like, Life has some very strong cards that are like very over DPP, and they've got a lot of good utility, so it's like, they can't really use Goat Monk or Hunting Worm, but that's sort of all that's really limited here in this matchup with Balance and Life. I do still think that Balance is favored a little bit just because of how they can like mess with pips and whatnot, but all you have to do is just press the Dark Surge card and you're fine on the Life, so very cool. Anyway, so yeah, still barely favoring the Balance, but of course this is going to flip pretty violently once the update comes out, but that's going to be fun to watch. So next up, we've got Myth versus Balance. I do think that this is going to go into the likely category, just because with Myth, it's sort of just a slugfest. You've got to kill them before they kill you because, you know, they have like a bunch of different 6-pip hits that just... They have a 6-pip hit for every scenario. They have 2 6-pip hits for 2 different scenarios, and then they have a 5-pip hit for the last scenario, but the 5-pip hit technically is valued at 6 pips because Wiz, I guess. So that's my rationale for that. But Myth versus Balance, I put this in the lean category before, but I do think that this has risen back up into the likely category. I think Myth is favored a little bit more against Balance, just because like Brace is kind of the only thing that a Balance can do against a Myth. It's like Balance is still it's this matchup isn't a total loss for the Balance because obviously Burn and Pop still exist, but once those are gone, the Myth is going to have a lot more free reign to do what they want, and that's probably going to be kind of disastrous for the Balance if I had to imagine. So that is where we're at with that. So Myth versus Balance in the likely category, but not by too much. I think this is like, if Balance versus Fire is Balance like winning by 15 more games out of 100, I think Myth is beating Balance by 16 games out of 100. These are very close together, in my honest opinion. Next up, Balance versus Storm. We've seen some reduction in this as well, and I do think that we can see Balance beating Storm, but not by as much as before. I had it... Where did I have it? Balance, Storm. Or I have this in the lean category. Yeah, I was thinking more toward the last time I made one. Or is this even the right one? I think this is the right one. I think I'm right on that. Is that... maybe something like that? Or no, this is the more accurate list, so that's what we're looking at. And I do think that, or yeah, that's about right. So I do think that Balance versus Storm, it's still a close matchup, but it's just not to where it's not as close as I thought it was before. It's like Storm is a pretty volatile school, but if the Balance has good enough deck RNG, I think they could win maybe, like, I don't know, 105 to 95, that type of deal. So that's where I think it's gonna end up. It's sort of just on on that brink of being a lean matchup, but I think the balance has sort of bounced back a little bit, just in terms of how balance plays. Like, you don't see Storms using Berry too much anymore, in favor of things like Catch of the Day and just sort of trying to go for the kill, but balance can definitely go for the kill against a Storm just as well. So balance v Storm, gonna go back to likely balance. Next up, Fire versus Death. Before I had this like right at the bottom of the safe category, but I think I could say with relative certainty that there's been a lot of reduction. I think Death is still favored a little bit, but it's not nearly to where it was with the safe category. It's like, before I had thought, you know, it's like if a fire is, if you can keep a -60 on a fire, you should stand a pretty good chance. That's how I always viewed it. But, you know, lately it just doesn't seem like fires care too much. It's like, I have seen people go for like the Rain of Fire strat and then send their rain through a 60 and a 30 weakness and still have it be a good move. It's only doing like, you know, 100 damage per tick, but that it's still 5 overtimes, and they use that to set up leverage. And with Fire's Packet Snowman, that sort of that really actually helps with the Death School. And I think we're just sort of in a position where there's been reduction here. I think Death's maybe favored in, like, I don't know, 8 more games out of 100. Call that, like, I don't know, 54 to 46 in favor of the Death. Because Fire still has low resist, and Death is able to capitalize on that. But it's like, if it comes down to who can kill who first, if the Fire is just spamming overtimes without a care in the world, and, you know, the Death isn't pulling counters or that sort of thing, or if they're not going for counters, they're just trying to set up their own thing, then that's when the Fire can pull ahead and just start hitting through -60s and being totally fine, because all the Fire really needs in that matchup is one open look, and that is enough usually. It's like, if you can get an open E freed off, like buffed or unbuffed, that is doing a lot of damage. That is the bulk of the damage that you deal in a match against a Death, and it's just very strong. It's like, Fire, I think it's much better off than it was back when I made this the last video, but Death I still think has a slight upper hand, just because Grim Reader is like a total Thanos hit, and if a Death can keep up a shield for any reason for longer than, like, I don't know, 1 turn, it's like they can use Ghoul and really pressure a good hit. It's like Death has offensive tools, Fire has offensive tools, and it can sort of come down to who can kill who first. And right now, I think that goes to the Fire, but with how weaknesses work, Death might be able to tank 1 more hit, and that can make or break a game if the Fire can or can't get that off. So I do think Death is just slightly favored against Fire. That's just how I see things, though. So next up, we've got Fire versus Myth. At the last one, at the last 2 really, I gave this a tilt rating in favor of the Myth Wizard, and I think that we've seen a flip here. This, I think, is going to be our first flip of the video, and we're going to see Fire taking the victory against the Myth School. I don't think it's by an insane margin, because remember, it's all like, if a Myth just sticks to using a bunch of different buffs, like, you know, regular blade, TC blade, Sunblade, and then, you know, Reliquary, go for a base gen, that is pretty like brainless and linear gameplay, and it'll work against a Fire, that's for sure. But Fire, I do think, has regained the upper hand against the Myth School, as it should. Fire should counter Myth, and at least we're down to only 1 counter matchup going the opposite way. How about that? But Fire, I think Fire does beat Myth. I don't think it's by much, but they do. And, you know, like a Fire Myth dual schools into Fire, because, you know, Fire just really helps them. with their setup. It's like having elves can be good. It's like Myth can just use fire spells in a good way, and like that's useful for them. But it also means that they can't really counter fire as well, and that, I think, is where we see the flip happen. There's just too many. It's just, as a Myth, you're sort of just running them down as quick as you can, not really bothering to counter. So when you go up against a school like Fire that, you know, does sort of counter your counter to any sort of hit, it's like a Fire can just go through a shield. When that happens, that's when the flip happens, and we'll talk about Myth versus Storm in a bit. But for now, I think Fire just has better leverage against Myth. Fire can use their overtimes in a better way, and I think that is where they pull ahead. It's like I was talking about earlier with the death matchup. Ifrit is sort of all you need, and yeah, it's like that's where it goes. You can also, it's like the Barry Rain of Fire strat works exceedingly well against Myth compared to other schools. So, you know, if you're going for that as well, that can work pretty good. So Fire beats Myth, I think, maybe like 5 more games out of 100. So it's like if it was like a 200 game type deal, it would be the Fire wins like 105 to the Myth's 95, that kind of thing. So it's still a very swingy matchup, but Fire is ultimately favored by a little bit. Next up, we've got, what is even the next one? Ice versus Storm. Now this one has been in an interesting spot, I think, because like if a Storm is running outgoing healing, then they can sort of bring this one down a little bit and keep this one into the lean category. I think that Ice is still favored against Storm, just based on stats and identity and all that, but fundamentally, Ice struggles so much with healing, and that's why you see Life versus Ice in the one-sided tier. So if a Storm starts sending berries out like it's nothing, then that's a problem for the Ice. And like typically, the Ice is not going to be able to keep up. That alone, Berry Surprise alone, is going to be what keeps this in the swing matchup sort of category between tilts and leans. So I do think that Ice is slightly favored, but can still lose if the Storm is sort of playing an attrition game, which usually Storm doesn't, but what can you do, right? Dink my oiter. Anyway, for the next one, Death versus Life, it's flipped so dramatically badly. It's pretty bad, but next up is Life versus Myth. This one, where did I put it last time? I put this with Myth beating Life. I don't know. I think I can say that I don't know. I think this is favoring Life again. I think it's I think I'm going to put it in the tilt category. I think Life is going to beat Myth by just the tiniest of margins. This is like 99 games favored for the Myth versus 101 for the Life. That's how close this is. Gulp, gulp, gulp. Anyway, but yeah, that is really how close this matchup is. And the Life should win just based off of like fundamentals. It's like Life can heal pretty well. They have that obnoxious flying rat that is 79 over DPP. But anyway, it's like Life has a very good shot against Myth. But if the Myth starts playing all linear and just going for like a Jin type hit, that's when this matchup gets a little sus. But if the Life is using fire spells like I do on my Life, then the Life can definitely bring that back. It's just a matter of pulling the cards. So Life versus Myth, I think, is going to barely favor Life. It's going to tilt back in favor of the Life school. And yeah, that is going to be the second flip of the video after Fire versus Myth. So that is where we're at on that matchup. And I guess the last one to talk about here for a dramatically shorter video. So the last matchup that we're going to be talking about, and where it stands as we leave this meta where all of this is accurate, and we go into another meta where you've got like just so much of this is going to get shaken up, and I'm excited to go over it and see how that ends up looking in a few weeks once the meta is sort of settled down, and we're going to figure that out. But for now, this matchup, Storm versus Myth, and last time I put this matchup as a likely victory for the Storm, and I think that's where it's going to stay. And we're going to see a little bit of an expansion. I think I said maybe but Storm beats Myth, maybe 15 more games out of 100. But now I believe that's extended to maybe 20. It's about a 60-40 matchup in favor of the Storm at this point. Just because it's like, Myth is going to have an easier time than Fire is for sure. Like without a doubt. But ultimately, it's like if the Storm is running like Fire off school, which why shouldn't they? That is going to take out the Myth's main route to victory there, and that of course being just trying to set up a shield gambit, go for a Jhin, because you only need like one Jhin and then maybe one extra hit to kill the Storm. So yeah, it's a very volatile matchup, but I do think that when it comes to who is favored, I think the Storm is favored very... I don't know if I would say slightly, because I put it at the back of the likely category, but I do think that Storm is favored here, and yeah, it's like Myth has a chance, much more of a chance than Fire does. This is like plus 60, no troll. For those of y'all who saw my most recent Storm PvP video, where I went against a guy who used 9 set shields, he was a Fire who used 9 set shields, it's like... that was a particularly, I don't even know how to describe it, but 9 set shields and still lost. That's where we're at with this matchup, so that's why it's so far in the save category. But when it comes to Storm versus Myth, Myth is a lot more sustainable than Fire, without a doubt, with roughly the same in terms of like damage output and much stronger utility against Storm. But I do think that Storm is favored, just because of things like, catch and, maybe not Catalan, but it's like being able to just run them down. That's sort of Storm specialty, so that is where I think we're going to leave that. So, for the last ranking, before Balance has its fall from grace, we have Balance undoubtedly up top, and then following Balance... what do I even want to say for that? Following Balance. Because Balance is still definitely number 1, but I don't think it's by as much. Myth has some good matchups. Life has some good matchups. Life is favored in 4. And reasonably could win a 5th. I don't know, man. There's been some people lately who have been saying, Life is the best school, and although I don't really think that it is, I mean, Balance is still pretty oppressive, but I've put Life in the middle of the pack for a while, and I think that even before this update, where Life is undoubtedly going to be on top, I think that Life might be taking our number 2 spot. Like, genuinely, it's like... there are 2 swing matchups that involve the Life, so Life could win either of these if they play right. And then, obviously, like, the others are just all in the safe or one-sided categories, so it's like, you either have to use your brain or you don't. And then sometimes you just lose to Storm. But ultimately, I think that this is going to favor Life. I think we're going to put Life at the number 2 spot, followed right on its heels by the Myth School. I think Myth is... it's sort of taken a little bit of a tumble. Myth was favored in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of its matchups, and right now it is favored in just 3-0. So it's like Myth can still win here, Myth can still win here, but it doesn't really favor them by as much anymore. So I think Myth is going to fall down to the 3rd spot, I want to say. Well, let me look at Storm. Let me look at Storm before I make that final call. So Storm can beat its main counter. Storm has a reasonable shot at beating the best school. Storm has a good shot at beating Myth, which sort of just tosses everything else, or at least most of the things. And then I have this here, but Storm can press Death in certain situations. And then Storm obviously very good against Life and Fire. So I don't know, maybe just on principle. Because like Myth and Storm right now, they're very hard to put into this ranking. I think we're going to see... I'm going to walk back what I said about Myth being 3rd. I think I'm going to say Storm is 3rd, Myth is 4th, but they are like interchangeable with one another. I think that, you know, those schools are, like, they can perform. They can perform very well. And I think Storm might have the slightest of edges there, but ultimately they're both very good schools. So Storm going to go in 3rd, Myth going to go in 4th, and then it is a steep drop-off before we see the 5th place, or the school that takes 5th place, that being Fire. I think that Fire has come up since the last one. I think if I remember correctly, I put Fire just at the bottom last time just because of all the matchups they were losing and not having the best stats. But ultimately, I think that Fire, it's like... it's made some meaningful gains, especially against Death and Myth. And... I mean, Balance, it's made some gains as well there. But I think that... I think Fire is going to take the 5th place spot. I think Fire... It's if they can get their combo off, it can be deadly, and Fire is very good at capitalizing on that sort of thing. It's like Fire makes use of Dark Surge very, very well, and I think that they absolutely deserve to be placed at 5th here. They're not a great school, but they're not as bad as 6 and 7, and 6, I think I can say with relative certainty, is going to be the Death School. It performs pretty well against one of the most queued schools right now, being Storm. And then it can beat Fire. Fire's queued a lot as well. So Death, it is good against a couple schools. And it does have a pretty good safe matchup. But I don't think it's as good as I thought it was going to be. It's like the Drain nerf really hit the school hard, and I do think that Death does still have the best stats in the game, without a doubt. If you're not careful with the Death, they can like hit you real hard real quick, but Death's main identity, it's like Snowman being a thing that exists, sort of really, like, you don't see people queuing Death a lot these days because it's like they're just not as great as they used to be, and they don't really have that many tools that they can leverage. It's like, I like going for 3-fold mash combos, but it's like even those you can kind of see coming and you can play around them. So yeah, I think Death will go in 6th, and then even like right on Death's heels, I think is going to be Ice. I think we do sort of see something. We see a pattern here. It's like Death and Ice have 2 lean matchups where they are, I guess, favored, and then 2 safe matchups, and then that's it. So, but just on the basis of 2 schools being automatic losses for Ice, I think that's going to put Ice in the bottom spot yet again, as a matter of fact. And I think it might come up in the next update. A lot of people are expecting it to, and I'm excited to see how that goes personally. But for the time being, I think we're just going to see. I think we're going to see Ice just sit here down at the bottom for maybe just a little while longer. We're going to see how it looks once the new meta has shaken up, the rankings and all that. So that is going to wrap up. So that is my full and finished tier list. We've got, just once over it, we've got Balance at the top, then Life, then Storm, then Myth, and then Fire, and then Death, and then Ice. So, all in all, 4 very competitive schools. A 5th can catch people by surprise if they're not prepared, and then 6 and 7 just sort of suck, but whatever. So, that is going to wrap up this video. Thank y'all for watching. I have been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I will see y'all later.